Hey everyone, and welcome back to Western Flavors. Before we begin our new episode, let's recap the powerful and healing events from our last story. After Amy gently confronted Ty about the anger he was still carrying, he sought the counsel of the two most important father figures in his life. Tim gave him his fiery advice to use his anger as fuel, while Jack offered his quiet wisdom about finding peace through forgiveness. In a beautiful, intimate moment, Amy promised to support him no matter which path he chose. The story ended with Ty making a conscious and powerful decision to let go of his hatred for Nathan, finally finding a true, unburdened peace. If you're enjoying this new season, please take a second to hit that like button and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a chapter. Now today, with his mind finally clear, Ty figures out the next crucial step in rebuilding his future. The days that followed Ty's quiet, personal decision at the creek were the most peaceful he had known since his return. The constant low-grade war that had been raging in his soul was finally over. He had chosen peace, and in doing so, he had finally, truly, and completely evicted the ghost of Nathan Price from his mind. The change in him was profound. The last lingering traces of the haunted, angry man were gone, replaced by a deep, quiet, and steady sense of calm. He was a man who was, for the first time in 4 long years, completely and utterly at peace with himself. His family, who had been his unwavering anchor through the storm, now got to enjoy the beautiful, sun-drenched harbor of his recovery. The atmosphere at Heartland was one of pure, uncomplicated, and deeply cherished domestic bliss. The mornings were filled with the easy laughter of a family that was no longer just healing, but was now simply living. Ty and Amy's relationship had deepened into a beautiful, mature partnership, their love a quiet, steady, and unbreakable foundation. And his bond with Lindy, now free from the shadows of his own internal turmoil, was a source of a pure, simple, and profound joy. But peace, for a man like Ty Borden, a man whose entire identity had been forged in the fires of purpose and action, was a strange and slightly uncomfortable new territory. He had spent weeks fighting for his family, fighting for his own sanity, and now that the fight was over, a new and completely unexpected feeling began to creep in. A quiet, restless sense of youth. He would watch Amy in the round pen, her gift with the horses a brilliant, almost magical thing, and he would feel a profound sense of awe, but also a pang of a feeling he couldn't quite name. He would watch Jack, his gnarled, capable hands mending a piece of tack with a lifetime of practice skill, and he would feel a deep, abiding respect. He was surrounded by people of purpose, people who were healers, who were builders, who were the steady, beating heart of this place. And he was just there, a man who did chores. A man who had survived, but a man with no real tangible purpose of his own. The joy of his return, as profound and as beautiful as it was no longer enough. He needed more. He needed to be more. The moment of realization came on a beautiful, clear, and cool autumn afternoon. He was leaning on the fence of the main paddock, watching Amy work with a new, deeply troubled horse, a beautiful but terrified mare that had been badly abused. He watched as his wife, with her infinite patience and her almost supernatural empathy, began the slow, delicate work of earning the animal's trust. He was not just watching her as a loving husband, he was watching her as a veterinarian. He saw the subtle, almost imperceptible signs of a physical injury that was likely the source of the horse's psychological trauma. He saw the slight favor she gave to her back leg, the way she flinched when Amy's hand got too close to her withers. And his mind, the sharp, analytical, and deeply knowledgeable mind of the skilled healer he had once been, began to work. It began to diagnose. It began to form a treatment plan. He didn't say anything. He didn't intervene. This was her work, and he respected it. But the experience was a powerful and deeply clarifying one. He realized, in that moment, that the one part of his old life that Nathan had not been able to touch, the one part that was still purely and completely his, was his knowledge, his skill, his calling. He had been so focused on rebuilding his life as a husband and a father that he had completely neglected to rebuild the other, essential part of himself, the vet, the healer. And he knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones that he would never be truly completely whole again until he had reclaimed that part of himself too. The final and most important piece of the puzzle of his own resurrection had just finally and clearly clicked into place. The moment of clarity in the paddock was a powerful, galvanizing force. The restless, formless feeling of uselessness that had been a quiet, persistent hum in the background of Ty's newfound peace had finally been given a name, a lack of purpose. He was a husband and he was a father, and those were the most important, most sacred roles of his life. But he was also a healer, And he knew with a certainty that settled deep in his soul that he would never be truly completely whole again until he had reclaimed that essential part of himself. Later that afternoon, after the day's chores were done and a quiet, peaceful lull had settled over the ranch, he found himself walking with a new, determined stride towards the old vet clinic. The small, self-contained building, which had been his first tentative step into a real professional life, had been a silent, dusty, and largely forgotten place since his return. It had been a place of obsessive, desperate study, and a place he had avoided since finding his peace, its very presence a quiet subconscious reminder of a part of himself he had not yet been ready to face. But today, he was ready. He pushed open the door, a familiar protesting creak in the quiet afternoon. The air inside was still and cool, thick with the nostalgic medicinal scent of antiseptic and old leather. The late afternoon sun slanted through the single dusty window, illuminating millions of tiny dust motes dancing in the air like a private golden galaxy. The place was a time capsule, a perfect preserved diorama of the life he had left behind 4 years ago. He walked slowly through the small, familiar space. He ran a hand over the cool, stainless steel surface of the examination table. He looked at the shelves, still lined with the glass bottles of medicines and supplies, their labels now faded, their contents long since expired. He saw his old, worn-out vet bag sitting on a chair in the corner, exactly where he had left it. He walked into the small, adjoining office, a space that had been his private sanctuary, and there, hanging on the wall, framed and slightly askew, were his diplomas, his high school equivalency, his undergraduate degree from the University of Calgary, and his doctorate of veterinary medicine. They were the tangible, hard-won proof of a journey that had taken him from a troubled, angry kid with no future to a respected and accomplished professional. They were a testament to a man who had, against all odds, built a life for himself, a life of purpose, of meaning, of a deep and abiding commitment to healing. He stood there for a long time, just looking at them, a profound and deeply, deeply emotional wave of a feeling he couldn't quite name washing over him. It was not just pride, it was recognition. He was a man who had spent 4 long years as a ghost, a man with no name, no history. And here on this quiet, dusty wall was the undeniable, irrefutable proof of who he was. He was not a victim. He was not a survivor. He was Dr. Ty Borden, DVM. And in that moment, the last of the lingering, formless restlessness in his soul finally, completely, and utterly dissolved. It was replaced by a new, brilliant, and absolutely certain sense of purpose. This was not just a part of his past. This was his future. This was the work he was born to do. And this quiet, simple, and profound act of reclaiming his own hard-won identity was the final, most important, and most necessary step in his own healing. The decision was no longer a vague, half-formed idea. It was a solid, unshakable, and deeply exciting reality. He was going to be a veterinarian again. The profound, life-altering decision, once made in the quiet, dusty solitude of the vet clinic, was a fire in Ty's soul. It was a new, brilliant, and deeply exciting sense of purpose, a feeling he hadn't had in years. The last, final, and most important piece of himself, the piece he had thought was lost to him forever, was finally, blessedly within his reach. He was not just a survivor anymore. He was a healer. And he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, what he had to do next. This was not a decision to be made in a vacuum. It was a decision that would affect his entire family, and there was one person, his partner in all things, who needed to be the first to know. He found her where he always did, in the heart of the ranch, in the main barn. She was in a stall with the same troubled mare he had been watching her with earlier, her back to him, her voice a low, soothing murmur as she worked her quiet, gentle magic on the traumatized animal. He stood in the doorway of the stall for a long moment, just watching her, his heart so full of a deep and profound love and admiration for the incredible woman she was, that it was a physical, aching presence in his chest. She was so engrossed in her work, so completely and beautifully in her element, that she didn't hear him approach. He came to stand beside her at the stall door, his presence a quiet, supportive, and familiar one. She finally seemed to sense him, and she turned, a soft, welcoming smile on her face.
Hey, I didn't hear you come in.
I didn't want to interrupt. You've made a lot of progress with her. She's not holding as much tension in her hindquarters.
His voice was a low, professional murmur, the voice of a vet, and the sound of it so full of his old, familiar confidence made her own smile widen.
I know. She's starting to trust me. It's just going to take time.
They stood in a comfortable, companionable silence for a moment, Two master healers observing the beautiful, fragile process of a broken spirit beginning to mend. It was the perfect and most fitting backdrop for the conversation he needed to have. He took a deep breath, the familiar, comforting scent of hay and horses a grounding force.
Amy, I need to talk to you about something.
She turned to face him fully, her attention completely his now, her perceptive eyes immediately sensing the new serious and deeply excited energy that was radiating from him.
I was in the clinic earlier, looking at my old books, my diplomas, and I realized something. I've spent the last few months trying to find my place here again, trying to be a husband, a father, and it's been the most beautiful, most important work of my life. But a part of me has been missing, a big part.
He looked at her, his own eyes shining with a new, brilliant, and deeply passionate light.
I need to be a vet again. Amy, it's not just something I did, it's who I am, and I can't be a whole person for you, for Lindy, for myself, until I have that part of my life back.
The words, a powerful, confident, and deeply honest declaration of his own personal and professional needs, hung in the quiet, sun-drenched air of the barn. Amy looked at him, at the fire in his eyes, at the new and wonderful sense of purpose that seemed to be radiating from every pore of his being, and her own heart swelled with a fierce and profound pride. This was the man she had married, the man who had, against all odds, built a life, a career, a purpose for himself out of the ashes of a broken past.
Oh, Ty, of course. I think that's a wonderful idea.
It's not going to be easy.
He admitted, the practical, logistical hurdles of his decision a sobering but not discouraging reality.
My license has been inactive for over 4 years. I'll have to reapply, probably take a whole new set of board exams, and I'm so far behind. The amount of new research, new techniques, new medicines that have come out in the last 4 years, it's like starting all over again. It's going to be a lot of work, a lot of late nights studying. It's going to take time.
He was not asking for her permission. He was stating the facts. But he was also, in his own quiet way, asking for her partnership, for her support in this new and difficult journey. Her response was immediate, absolute, and full of a quiet, unwavering, and deeply, deeply loving conviction. She stepped forward and took his hands in her own, her gaze steady and sure.
We've done hard things before, Ty. We can do this, and you won't be starting all over again. You have your gift, your instinct, that never went away. The rest is just catching up, and I will be right here beside you, every single step of the way. We'll do it together.
Her words, a simple, powerful, and absolute declaration of her own faith in him, in them, was the final, most important validation he needed. He pulled her into a tight, grateful hug, his own heart so full of a love, a gratitude, and a new brilliant and exciting hope for their shared future that he couldn't speak. He just held her. The two of them, a perfect, unbreakable team, ready to face the next and most exciting chapter of their lives together. The hug in the middle of the barn aisle was a quiet, powerful, and deeply healing moment. Ty held his wife, his heart so full of a profound and deeply grateful love that he couldn't speak. Her faith in him, her unwavering, unconditional, and absolute belief in his ability to reclaim his own life was the final, most important piece of the puzzle. He was not just a man with a dream, he was a man with a partner, and with her by his side he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his soul, that he could do anything. They stood there for a long time, two people in a quiet, sun-drenched barn, their shared silent embrace a testament to a love that had, against all odds, survived. But they were not alone. A small, quiet figure who had been sitting in a nearby stall, carefully grooming her own pony, had been a silent and deeply attentive witness to the entire emotional conversation. Lindy had not understood all the words. She did not understand the complexities of a veterinary license or the daunting challenge of 4 years of missed medical advancements, but she had understood the heart of it. She had seen the new brilliant and excited light in her father's eyes. She had heard the quiet, proud, and unwavering love in her mother's voice, and she had understood, with the simple, profound wisdom of a child, that her daddy had found a new and very important piece of his own lost heart. As Ty and Amy finally reluctantly broke their embrace, their own faces a mask of a shared, hopeful, and deeply loving resolve, Lindy slid quietly off the bale of hay where she had been sitting. She had her own, very important and deeply personal, part to play in this new chapter of her father's life. She ran from the barn, her small boots pounding on the hard-packed dirt, leaving a completely bewildered Ty and Amy in her wake.
Lindy? Sweetie? Where are you going?
But she did not answer. She was a girl on a mission. She returned a moment later, her own face a mask of a serious and deeply, deeply important purpose. She was carrying something in her small, outstretched hands with a reverent, almost sacred care. It was the small, intricately carved wooden horse, the one from the memory box, the one that was the first beautiful and tangible symbol of her own parents' love story. She walked up to her father, who was now kneeling on the ground to be at her level, his own face a mask of a loving and deeply curious confusion. She held the small wooden horse up to him, a precious and deeply significant offering. "This is for you, Daddy." Her voice was a small, quiet, and deeply serious murmur. "For your new office, for good luck." The gesture, so simple, so profound, and so full of a deep and deeply intuitive understanding, was a blow to Ty's heart. He looked from the small, perfect, and beloved object in his daughter's hands, the symbol of the very beginning of his life with her mother, to his daughter's own serious and loving face. She was not just giving him a good luck charm. She was giving him his own past back. She was giving him a blessing, a daughter's blessing for her father's new future. He was so overwhelmed with a love so profound, so all-consuming, that he could not speak. He just took the small wooden horse from her, his own large, scarred, and trembling hands, a stark contrast to her small, delicate ones. He held the object, its familiar, beloved weight, a solid, grounding presence in his hand, and he looked at his daughter, his beautiful, wise, and incredible daughter, and he knew, with a certainty that was the most powerful and most important realization of all, that he was the luckiest man in the entire world. The moment in the barn was a quiet, perfect, and deeply healing thing. Ty held the small wooden horse in his hand, a tangible physical link between the past he had thought was lost, the present he was so gratefully living, and the new hopeful future he was just beginning to build. He looked at his daughter, at her beautiful, trusting, and impossibly wise face, and then he looked at his wife, who was watching them both, her own eyes shining with a deep and profoundly proud love. In that one single, perfect moment, the last of the lingering, formless restlessness in his soul was gone. He was not just a survivor anymore, he was a man with a purpose, a husband, a father, and a healer. The rest of the day passed in a warm, happy, and productive glow. The decision, once made and shared, had infused the entire family with a new and exciting sense of purpose. That evening after dinner, the kitchen table at Heartland was not a place for a quiet family meal. It was a war room. Lou, in her element, had already created a detailed multi-tab spreadsheet on her laptop, outlining the entire complex process of Ty's recertification.
Okay, so according to the Alberta Veterinary Medical Association, because your license has been inactive for more than 3 years, you'll have to retake the clinical proficiency examination. It's a 3-day practical exam. They only offer it twice a year, in the spring and in the fall. The next one is in November. That gives you 3 months. It's a tight timeline, but it's doable.
Jack, a man who had a deep and healthy suspicion of all things bureaucratic, was on the phone with an old friend who sat on the veterinary board, his voice a low, charming, and persuasive rumble as he tried to navigate the complex and undoubtedly frustrating world of red tape. And Amy was his partner. She sat beside Ty, a stack of her own, more recent veterinary journals spread out on the table, her finger tracing the lines of text as she created a curriculum for him, a personalized study guide to the last 4 years of medical advancements.
Okay, so there's a whole new protocol for equine metabolic syndrome that you'll need to learn, and a new class of anti-inflammatory drugs that have completely changed how we treat laminitis. We can start with those tomorrow.
Ty sat in the middle of it all, a man at the center of a powerful, efficient, and deeply, deeply loving machine. He was not on this journey alone. He was a part of a team, a family, and their collective, unwavering belief in him was a more powerful, more motivating force than any textbook could ever be. The chapter ends not on the decision, but on the first, tangible step of the journey. The night is late. The bustling, productive energy of the kitchen has quieted down. The house is asleep. But a single solitary light is burning in the old, forgotten vet clinic. The final scene takes place in that quiet, sacred space. The clinic is no longer a dusty, forgotten relic of the past. It is clean now, organized, and it is a place of purpose again. Ty is sitting at his old desk, which is no longer empty, but is covered with a formidable and slightly intimidating mountain of thick new veterinary textbooks and printed medical journals. A single focused desk lamp cuts a warm golden circle of light in the surrounding darkness, illuminating his face, which is a mask of a deep, quiet, and profound concentration. He opens the first heavy book. He reads the first sentence and then the first page. He is a student again, a man at the very beginning of a long, hard, and deeply, deeply rewarding journey. He is tired, but it is a good, clean, and purposeful exhaustion. And there, sitting on the corner of his desk, in the soft, warm glow of the lamplight, is the small, intricately carved wooden horse, a silent, powerful, and deeply beloved guardian, a symbol of the love that had started it all, and the love that was, once again, showing him the way home. The final shot is of his focused, determined face, a man who had finally, truly, and completely begun the hard, honest work of rebuilding his own beautiful future.